and welcome to our virtual breakfast club. I am Assembly Member Sharon Quirk-Silva, and we're really excited you have chosen to join us. We much preferred when we could meet in person, but this is also what we're doing now, Zooming in. Today we have two great guests that I think are very relevant to what's happening, not only in the news, but as we approach our next election. We have with the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. I think he'll give a wave. And we have Registrar of Voters for Orange County, Neal Kelley. Before they make their comments, I'm just going to give a few comments myself, as we know that this has been a very challenging time for many families, transitioning to distance learning for those families who have children at home. I know our Secretary of State has 3 boys, and just getting them online with 3 different grade levels is a challenge, but a big shout out to the parents who are not only working from home, but teaching from home. Secondly, we know that we have lost many Americans, and I do want to send out condolences to anybody who has lost a loved one, whether it be a relative or even closer. It's very difficult, and we send our condolences. I also want to let you know that even though we had a very slim package this year for legislation, we continue to focus on housing, homelessness, and mental health. One of the bills that was signed for me this year is AB 2265, and that is a Mental Health Services Act. And what this says to counties is that you can indeed see patients with co-occurring issues, meaning a patient who might be suffering from mental health and addiction at the same time. We know not all patients have co-occurring conditions, but we also know that some actually have 3 or even 4. It could be a physical issue, addiction, and even mental health. And this clarifies to counties that you can in fact use MHSA funds for that. And we're hoping that will keep some of these patients from having to go from one place to another and actually get the help they need. We also spent a lot of time this year working on everything from mortgages to rent and evictions. Very difficult. We know that right now families are, many of them, not even receiving paychecks, but for some, a looming eviction that they are dealing with. One of the bills that we were able to get signed is that if a client can prove that they've had COVID-19 financial hardship, then they can pay 25% of their rent until the end of January. We know this is not a perfect bill, and we will go back in January and look towards working with our colleagues and collaborating so that we may be able to offer even more support. We certainly want to make those who own the property, landlords or individuals who have invested in property whole, but we also want to keep people in their rental units, knowing that once somebody is evicted, it can take many years for them to clear their record and find stable housing. And we certainly don't want to see our homeless numbers increase. Something that's really exciting for me personally is that I was named and appointed chair to the Assembly Arts and Entertainment Committee. And this committee covers everything from tourism to youth sports to college sports to theme park venues to professional venues. And we are going to be doing everything we can to open some of our places of entertainment as best we can and do that safely. And that is not an easy job to do, but we want to make sure people get the message that California is going to do everything they can to keep people working here in our state. And we will hold our first hearing actually tomorrow at the state capitol on tourism. And lastly, I do want to let you know that our office has worked very closely with constituents on helping when they find areas of issue with the unemployment department, or EDD. So if you have a problem with that, please call our office and we'll do our best to solve those issues. We can't promise every issue will be solved, but we'll do our best. So I'm going to now move on to our special guest, Secretary of our State of California. And I'd like to introduce Alex Padilla. He served as California's Secretary of State since 2014. How did that happen? It just seems like a year or two ago. So 6 years now in this position. Prior to his position as Secretary of State, Alex served in the California State Senate. He represented the 20th District since November 2006. In addition to that, he also served on the Los Angeles City Council representing the 7th District. This is very interesting. He is a graduate from San Fernando High School and an MIT graduate, which is a very difficult major and area to focus on, and we want to see more of our students get that far. But we know he's done an excellent job. California's got a lot of work to do. So without further ado, Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back as some member of Quirk-Silva. Yes, it seems like it was just a blink of an eye ago when we were visiting your breakfast club in person. So thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes this morning to give a little bit of an overview on what we should all be expecting with this November election. It's only 21 days away, but in many ways is already happening now. So I'll give sort of a big picture perspective and allow my friend and colleague, Neal Kelley, to fill in some Orange County specifics in terms of what voters need to be aware of before we get to the Q&A function. And the last bit of housekeeping, of all the days for my neighbors to decide to trim their trees. Today's that day. So if there's a little bit more background noise than usual, I apologize. I'm hoping this hardwire mic helps a little bit at least. But look, I think it's an understatement to say that we know we've been preparing for the most consequential election in a generation, this 2020 presidential election. We had actually a very successful primary election. Record registration going into the March primary. You remember it was a little bit earlier than typical. Record turnout, more ballots cast in California in this year's primary than any primary election in California history. So just by those metrics, one could say the state of our democracy is strong. We know there's been a lot of energy out there about registering and voting in this election for a number of issues, local, state, and national. But that March primary was just before the declaration of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was just after the primary election when my office started convening with legislative representatives, the governor's office, Neal Kelley and his 57 colleagues throughout the state of California, voting rights advocates and others, to ask ourselves this question: how do we go about preparing for November in a way that ensures our elections are accessible, are secure, but also safe given the COVID-19 pandemic? And so here's the plan that we collectively came up with. And it's built on a lot of the policies that we've been championing in recent years to increase access to the ballot anyway. So first of all, you know you can't vote unless you're registered, and there's no safer physically distancing way to register to vote or to update your registration than to do it online. So at the state level, we try to put all of our tools and resources in one location for voters, vote.ca.gov. So we'll add that to the chat box here in a minute. You can go there to register to vote. If you haven't already, there's still time. I know most of you are, maybe all of you are. It's always a good idea to verify your registration status, make sure your information is current and up to date. And if you need to update any of your information, you can, again, go to the register to vote function and do it there. It just takes a couple of minutes. And while you're at it, I'm going to ask that you all sign up for Where's My Ballot? And it'll make a lot of sense here in a minute. Where's My Ballot, also available at vote.ca.gov, is our ballot tracking tool available to all voters in the state of California. When you subscribe, you can choose to receive email alerts, text message alerts, or phone calls on the status of your ballot through the process, both on its way to you and on its way back to the county. And Sharon, imagine the peace of mind that comes with getting a confirmation message. Your ballot arrived at the county today and when your ballot was counted. So great for transparency.
And I actually went
great for
on that
accountability
tracker myself, and it works.
Good for you.
Yes.
And obviously great for peace of mind, because I know there's questions about vote by mail that continue even in recent days. And so once you've done that to prepare, here's what you need to know in terms of your voting options. This is probably not a surprise to you, but in California, we decided that every active registered voter would automatically receive a ballot for this November election. Again, given the COVID-19 pandemic, no safer way to vote than from the comfort and safety of your own home. So let's make it easy. You probably received your ballot already. If not, it's probably coming any day now, because last week was the deadline for ballots to go out from the county. When you receive your ballot, again, you fill it out at your leisure, and you have multiple options for how to return your ballot. You can return it by mail, and thanks to Sharon and her colleagues in the legislature and the governor, return postage is prepaid, so you don't even have to worry about stamps anymore. If you choose, you can deliver your ballot to any secure ballot drop box in the county. Make sure it's an official drop box, and you can look those up either on my website or the Orange County Registrar's website to make sure you're returning it to an official secure ballot drop box. If you choose, you can also return your ballot in person to any in-person voting location, either on election day or during the early voting period. So multiple ways to return your ballot. For folks who need to vote in person, and there's folks who need that for a number of reasons, Orange County will offer several opportunities to vote safely in person, both on and before election day. But kind of like going to the grocery store isn't the same anymore. Bring your mask, look for the signage, physical distancing being implemented at the vote centers in Orange County. Poll workers will be wearing their PPE to keep themselves and you safe. Plenty of hand sanitizer for everybody. You know, all the things that we need to do to keep the in-person voting experience safe and healthy for everybody as well. But one more reminder for people who will be voting by mail, in addition to your options for how to return your ballot. If you're mailing it back, and I still think the Postal Service is a reliable way to return it, know that your ballot must be postmarked on or before election day. Will allow it to arrive up to 17 days after the election and still be counted, but it must be postmarked on or before election day in order to count. So obviously the sooner the better when it comes to returning your ballots. And frankly, whether you decide to vote by mail or vote in person, the earlier the better as well. Return your ballot early, make it among the first to be counted. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, could you explain the 17 days after? Because I hear a lot of conversation about that, and why would a ballot take so long to count and so forth?
Sure. And then I'll wrap it up because I want to give Neal an opportunity to chime in here as well before the Q&A. So current state law says ballots that are postmarked on or before election day can arrive up to 3 days after the election and still be counted, right? We don't want a voter to lose their right to have their vote counted through no fault of their own. But because of the chatter we've heard at the Postal Service, potential delays, we've extended that deadline for the ballot to arrive and still be counted, but it must be postmarked on or before election day. You can't mail it the day after the election and expect it to count. It's like trying to vote in person after the polls close, right? So mail it sooner rather than later. Yes, we're building in that extra time for any unforeseen delays through the Postal Service.
And sometimes we have people voting from overseas, military folks, students maybe voting from out of state, so forth. Just so people know that that could be also something. They may get it sent on with a postmark, but it might not arrive on that election day.
Right. And I guess the last piece in closing here is going back to the voter registration piece. If anybody misses the deadline to register to vote for this election, October 19th, you still have the option of showing up in person and participating in same-day registration at any vote center in Orange County.
And is that up until election day? If you're
all the way through election day, all the way till 8 o'clock, but I'll let Neal
okay. So
chime in on that as well.
That's definitely new as well. All right, so we're going to move to our next special guest, and then we'll take some questions at the end. But we have with us Neal Kelley, who is the Registrar of Voters for Orange County in California. And he is responsible for overseeing voting for the 5th largest voting jurisdiction in the United States, serving more than 1.6 million registered voters. He has served as the chief election official since 2005 and has led the Registrar of Voters office through the largest cycle of elections in the county's 130-year history. I will add my opinion to this. He's very highly regarded throughout the United States as an esteemed expert in making sure we can vote safely, make sure he has all the protocols in place. Neal earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in business from the University of Redlands and an MBA from the University of Southern California. Ruins, no, I'm joking. Anyhow, he has done an excellent job for us. He is also the past president of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, CACEO, and is the past president for the National Association of County Recorders, Election Officials, and Clerks, NACRC. So I am pleased to introduce him and welcome him. Mr. Kelley.
Thank you, Assembly Member. It's great to be here with you, and I appreciate the invitation. And then also just to be here with our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. He, under his leadership, has done a great job here in California, and so it's an honor to be here with both of you. I want to talk first, and so the Secretary did a great job of kind of giving a great overview of all of the options that voters have, and just very specific to Orange County, I want to talk about returns. I'll start off with that. So we mailed out our ballots on October the 5th, and we started receiving ballots back the very next day, which was great. The energy is high, obviously, and that's not lost on anybody on this, I'm sure, this call. But listen to this. So as of this morning, we have just under 100,000 ballots returned. At the same time period in 2016, we had 21,000 ballots returned. So this gives you an idea of the energy, and excitement with the election, which is great news. And I'm happy to see that. I do want to talk about the options for Orange County voters, and it kind of parallels what the Secretary was saying, but we'll talk about in-person options here first. There's 3 options that voters have. The first is that they will be able to start casting in-person ballots at our pop-up events. These will be mobile events where we will be throughout the community starting on October the 24th. And these are great events because we're at farmers markets, we're at shopping malls, et cetera, where people are heavy foot traffic. And you can find those locations on our website at ocvote.com. And you'll just click the in-person options. The other option for them is our vote centers. And our vote centers will start opening on October the 30th, and they will run through election day. So we'll have 5 days of in-person voting at fixed locations. The number of sites we have throughout the county are 168. And so there's going to be one very close to you and your community. You can find those locations again at ocvote.com. You'll be able to type in your address wherever you're at, by the way. So if you're in your office, you can type in your address. It'll give you the closest location to your office. You don't have to be next to your home, which is fantastic. And then, of course, since we're a vote center county, you can vote at any one of those locations in the county. And then the third option, even though this is still a vote center, I like to tout it, is our partnership with the Ducks and Honda Center here in Orange County. That is going to be a very large location that will be open starting October the 30th. We just had an operational meeting there the other day. We're going to have 450,000 usable square feet between the outside and the inside concourses. We will have drive-through voting, we'll have drive-through ballot drop-off, and we will have voting in person inside. 10 check-in stations when you walk in, and we're going to have over 100 voting booths, and we're going to have 10 scan stations on the exit. So we'll be able to process a tremendous amount of voters at that location. If you're out and about on the weekend, and the great thing about the Honda Center, as we all know, is it's centrally located and easy access on and off the freeway. So then I want to talk to you about your vote by mail options and your ballot return options. There are also 3 options with that as well. Those include through the mail. And as the Secretary said, and I just want to reiterate that point, that I have full faith and confidence in our postal system, and I work very closely with our postal officials here in Orange County. And I don't just take them at their word, Assembly Member. We look at the data on a daily basis. We're looking at that data by zip code, and we're in communication constantly with those postal officials. For instance, if I see a zip code that has a pocket of deliverable issues, they're on it immediately. And we have a great partnership with them. And I think by and large, you can see from the returns so far that the average voter feels comfortable with the postal system. That's pretty clear. The second option is that ballot return box that the Secretary talked about, official ballot return box. Please don't be fooled by unofficial ballot return boxes. There's a lot of good reasons that we control those boxes from a security perspective, installation, regulations, law, you name it. That's very important. And just a quick note on that, as of this morning, we've had over 20,000 voters use those official ballot drop boxes, which is terrific news as well. And then the third option is, of course, you could deliver it in person. Any of those 170 vote centers that I spoke to you about, those will be open. You don't have to wait in a line. If there is a line, you can bypass that and go directly to the front, hand off your ballot to one of our poll workers or our employees, and they will take that ballot from you. And so those are your 3 options when it comes to returning your ballot as well. Just a quick note for you on election night. So after the COVID exploded in the March primary, the first thing that came to my mind was, boy, we could have an all-mail ballot election in the fall because we didn't know where COVID was going. But now that we have this in-person and mail option, that works well because back in March, I doubled our capacity for scanning, the inbound automation, the inbound opening. And so I was prepared for an all-mail ballot election, but that really helps us out now because we're prepared to handle this increased volume. And so I can tell you that up to election morning, we will have every single ballot process that we've received that will be posted then on election night at 8:05. So that will be all of that posted. We then will start processing the inbound in-person vote center returns. We'll start that at 9 o'clock on election night, and we'll do that every 30 minutes until we're complete. And then finally, all that will be left is the ballots that arrived in the mail that people mailed or that they dropped off on election day. And that's very important because a lot of people might choose to do that. And so we'll be processing those post-election. I know that on other meetings that the Secretary and I have been on, we like to point out that, you know, California has 30 days to count those ballots. And there's good reason for that because there's a lot of checks and balances. And we want to ensure that those ballots are counted and treated with respect and that the votes are tallied properly. So there's a reason for that. And with that, Assembly Member, I again want to thank you for the opportunity.
I know we do have some questions that have been sent in, and if you don't mind, I'll start with a few of mine, and then we'll go into some that have been written to us. But what can you tell me about election night or day, or even before at voting centers, as far as security for voters, as far as people that may show up at a poll place saying they're observers? What are all the protocols or security measures that voters should expect?
Secretary, you want me to take
Sure.
that from Orange County?
Well, let me chime in first just with sort of what's clear in state law, and then you give us specifics in terms of the plans. And it's great that you have us both here, Sharon, because as many people know, but not everybody knows, you know, elections are a partnership between state and local elections officials. So as Secretary of State, I'm the Chief Elections Officer. We oversee policy, but ultimately elections are administered by the counties, right? It's Neal's office that distributes ballots, collects ballots, counts the ballots, et cetera. And so a couple of things for voters to understand in terms of state law. election observation, we have transparency in our free and fair elections. But we also have very clear in state law a voter's bill of rights, and that's available also at vote.ca.gov. Amongst your rights as a voter is the ability to be able to cast your ballot free of any harassment or intimidation. So there's a lot of chatter out there about poll watchers, you know, and it comes from different places and potentially different motivations. So I just want to make sure people understand, are poll observers allowed? Yes, but the rights of the voter must be respected at all times, and that includes, you know, uninhibited access to the voting location and ability to cast your ballot free of harassment or intimidation. If there's any issues that you experience or observe, you can report it to the county or to the Secretary of State's office, either through our website or our voter hotline at 1-800-345-VOTE. Neal, to you.
Thank you, Secretary. So we have some very robust plans for responding to potential issues at vote centers or in-person voting. And I don't want to, and I want to reiterate what the Secretary is saying, you know, first of all, we're not going to tolerate intimidation in our vote centers. It's just not going to be allowed at all. And I want to encourage voters to go vote and understand that my job is to make sure they have a fair and free opportunity to do that. And one of the things that we're doing is partnering with our local district attorney, who's just in a support role for us. And it's obviously our job to ensure that the rules are not being broken out in the vote centers. But if we do have issues, we have that support out in the field to support us. We also work closely with the FBI and Homeland Security on intelligence issues. And so we're on top of that as well. The other thing is, just to touch on the observer issue, one of the things that I did because of COVID was to create a remote broadcasting system for being able to view all the ballot processing procedures, all the signature reviews, et cetera. They can do that online at ocvote.com/observe. And we have limited space here in the office for people to observe physically, which we do have some folks that come in and do that. And then, of course, as the Secretary said, in the vote centers, there is that opportunity to observe, and that's all they can do. They can't interfere with the election process. And all of the rules and guidelines we have on that same website, ocvote.com/observe. And in fact, there's an online training video that they can watch as well.
Is there a certain amount of people who can observe in one place at a time, or they rotate in and out, or how would that work?
So here in Orange County, it's dependent on the size of the vote centers. So we have strict COVID-19 protocols that are in place, and we know based on the square footage how many individuals can be in each individual vote center. So it'll vary site to site.
And then as far as people watching votes being counted, that would typically be after Election Day to observe opening up the ballots that haven't been processed, and typically maybe somebody's vote count is very close and they want to make sure every vote is that typically who comes to watch? Or
Yes, ma'am, it is. I recall back in 2018 when we had those congressional battles going on, I had at one point 220 observers in my office. So they definitely do show up post-election sometimes.
Right. And I know, I think it was in 14 or 12 for me, where we had some people down there watching and so forth. Neal, can you just talk about what you think it might look like if there are any changes as far as the way votes are coming in compared to maybe the past when?
Yeah, so I was looking just recently at the data, in fact, as of late as last night, and it's kind of across the board. I'm not seeing heavy returns from one party or the other. You know, as we saw in 2018, we had a lot of late ballots being cast by Democrats, and then early votes were being cast by Republicans. But at this point right now, it looks kind of like a mix. And that's a good thing about our website. We have a full real-time website that you can go on there and sort by party, even if you want to see what the returns look like in terms of what's coming in. So I would encourage people, they can do that daily if they want.
And what site is that again?
It's ocvote.com. And if you just go to the bottom of the page and click Data Central, we have about 150 data points that people can look at in real time.
And then just so you know, for those listening, is if you have a candidate that you are really supporting and you want to see how they're doing, particularly on election night, you may need to go to both sites, the Orange County Registrar and the state, depending on if it is a candidate that is running in more than one county. So for example, a Congress member may have some of Orange County and some of LA County. Because sometimes if you just go to one, you're like, what happened? And then you go to the other site and you realize, okay, these are, some counties haven't even counted yet. Joseph, do you have any questions that we need to get answered from some of our friends out there?
So we do have a few that have come through. Thank you for all of those who are also watching this through our Facebook Live and being very active in our message box here for the comments. So one of the questions that we have received is, will notified voters receive a VBM ballot is being rejected, and why will they have the opportunity, or how will they have the opportunity to fix the problem and have their ballot tallied? So as we have mentioned prior in this, there have been issues with the official ballot return boxes. And so what would be a safe way to fix that problem, either for Neal or Alex?
I'll defer to you, Secretary.
No, well, I'll let you get the specifics in terms of what that opportunity to cure process is like, your efforts to contact the voters. I'll just remind people it's yet another benefit of signing up for ballot tracking. Again, vote.ca.gov, click on where's my ballot, not only to get those confirmation notices when your ballot's been received and when it's been counted, but when you sign up, to receive those messages by email, by text message, or by phone call, that's giving Neal and his team the specific contact information to reach you if they need to after the election.
And we are processing ballots as we speak. The legislature passed a bill related to COVID-19 that allows election officials to start processing those ballots on 29 days before Election Day. That doesn't mean we tally them, but we do all of the processing of the ballots. So we're actually sending letters out right now to voters that have neglected to sign their envelope, because that's one of the biggest reasons that we are sending those letters out. But as signatures are rejected, and they go through multiple layers before they're ultimately rejected, we then send a letter out to the voter as well, and an opportunity is there for them to cure it. We've just published on our website that they will have through November the 24th in order to cure any of those issues. So I really encourage voters to keep an eye out on your mailbox in case, or like the Secretary did, on tracking your ballot and understanding if that signature was rejected, and you should be expecting a notice from my office.
Hey, Neal, you want to just mention that, or how, if a signature is not exactly a match, then is it a machine or not a machine that decides whether that signature is a sufficient match in order to...
Sure, yeah. So here in Orange County, I have not been a fan of the software, and my preference is to use human beings to look and examine each individual signature. And we do that on every single ballot. And that goes through 3 layers. So it goes through a first pass, then it goes to a second tier that has a little bit more training, and they can dive into that a little bit further, and then finally a third pass before we would ultimately reject that signature. But we definitely err on the side of the voter. A good example is you see signatures now coming through the DMV or through online registration. It takes us a little bit more time to compare that signature to that envelope in some cases. But if I could give one piece of advice that I think has been resonating with folks, if you registered online or you registered at the DMV, pull out your driver's license out of your wallet or purse and look at that signature. That's the exact one we're looking at when we're making the comparison. So that's a good way to think about signing your ballot.
Well, thanks for
And
clarifying.
also, well, hang on. One of the things is, I know myself, sometimes I do cursive because that's how I sign my name, but now we know that some of our younger voters don't always do cursive. So when they're signing, but also when you're signing on the pad with maybe your finger, those signatures can look a little different. So you really safeguard that by having 3 people, not a machine, looking at those signatures. And then what happens if you can't, it's a tie? I mean, is a third person the tiebreaker, or?
Well, I mean, if it's on the fence, we're going to err on the side of the voter. That's what's going to happen. And I will tell you that's what I see on a daily basis. But if it clearly is a signature that just does not match, it does not look like it matches, that's what that fail-safe net is here in California for, which is great. So voters have an opportunity to sign that affidavit and said, yes, that's me.
And we also know that people are moving quite a bit, especially at this time. Do they still have time to change that address to where they moved, and what do they need to do to get that taken care of?
Absolutely. They can call my office at 714-567-7600. I don't like recording, so you'll go right to an operator, and then they can assist you. Or you can go online to ocvote.com/replacement, and you can get an updated ballot with your new address. And so it's real easy to go online to change your address in the registration system, and then we can get you an updated ballot.
And for a follow-up on that, because that was actually a really good transition for another question, and we did receive prior. What would be a realistic time period for those who were able to change their addresses to receive their new mail-in ballots from the date of the change of address?
So once the date of the change of address comes into us, we're issuing the new ballot within 24 hours.
Okay.
So it's pretty
Wow.
quick.
So it's sent out, let me just add here. So it's sent out within 24 hours, and it's going out as treated by the Postal Service as first-class mail, is my understanding. So just a couple of days for the ballot to arrive, well within a week's time frame, I think is a reliable time frame to give folks. I also want to add, because election integrity is on the minds of a lot of people these days. So Neal, can you confirm that if somebody does sort of call or online updates their address, requests a new ballot to their new address, what happens to the old ballot that was initially sent to that voter? You have a way of programming your system to disqualify that old ballot, so it will not be counted, right? Nobody can vote twice.
That's a great point. And in fact, so if a voter has two ballots in their hands because we sent a second ballot, and let's say they go to their old address and there's that ballot, that second ballot is void. So whatever ballot they send in first, the second one automatically is voided. And I am out in our warehouse on a daily basis, and those rejects, you can see them being rejected on our automation equipment.
And this is a little bit difficult, but what about people who have passed away and a ballot is sent to them?
And remember that happens all the time. We see voters, and there's about 1,100 individuals that pass away in Orange County each month. And we see that happen, where we mail out the ballots and a voter unfortunately passes away in between that time period. Now, if the voter has signed that ballot and the signature matches and they pass away in between, in other words, they mail it and then they pass away, we can verify the validity of that signature, and that ballot's going to count for that individual. So I just want to assure individuals out there that may have relatives that may have passed away, if they've already voted and sent in that ballot, it's going to count.
What happens if a family member gets it? What should they do with it?
They don't need to do anything with it if the voter has already passed away. They can discard that ballot because it will become a voided ballot because we're on top of that deceased data.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, Joseph?
Yes, so we did receive one from Susan Meyer. Will those responsible for the illegal fake official ballot collection boxes be prosecuted? I think this is more leaning for Secretary Padilla, so if you would like to address that.
Sure. No, I appreciate the question because we take that the unauthorized, unofficial ballot drop box issue very seriously. So it's still to be determined. Yesterday, we delivered jointly with the Attorney General's office cease and desist orders to the parties that have taken responsibility for the installation of those drop boxes. So there's still a little window of time for them to comply with our cease and desist orders and remove those unauthorized, unofficial drop boxes. If they comply, then I don't think there would be a need for any further legal action. If they don't comply, and the clock is ticking here, then yes, we will pursue any legal options to ensure compliance. Look, at the end of the day, it's about two things. Number one, upholding state law. Unauthorized, unofficial drop boxes are not permitted by state law. Number two, it's about security. Right, as Neal mentioned, there's a lot of regulations and requirements that go into the ballot drop boxes, from the specifications on construction of the boxes, the installation of drop boxes. It's only county officials that retrieve ballots from those boxes on a frequent schedule, etc. We don't know what's going on with the unofficial drop boxes. We can't speak to their security. We can't speak to who's retrieving the ballots. We can't guarantee that those ballots are arriving at the county. So they're very problematic for a number of reasons. And most importantly, voter confidence, right? If any voter was misled into delivering their ballot to one of these unauthorized drop boxes, we hope they're going to end up at Neal's office for the appropriate review, processing, and counting. So if any voter might have delivered their ballot to an unauthorized drop box, good practice to sign up for those alerts through Where's My Ballot to ensure your ballot was received by the county and that it's been counted. So if you have any questions, contact the state voter hotline or the Orange County Registrar's office directly. So, but to the question about legal action, we'll have that determined by the end of the week.
Yes.
Can you also speak to the difference between putting up these illegal ballot boxes and harvesting ballots?
Well, and I think that the terminology itself is also a little loaded, depending on how it's being presented. Right. Look, here's the bottom line for California voters, right? You have the power to decide how and when to return your ballot. And you have multiple options: by mail, number one, to any official drop box, number two, to any in-person voting location during the days of in-person voting, number three. If after all those options, you still need assistance in returning your ballot, you as a voter have the power to decide for yourself who you trust to help you return your ballot for you. But that individual must also sign the return envelope and note their relationship to you. Is it a family member? Is it a friend? Is it a neighbor, a coworker, etc.? I think one of the problems with these unauthorized drop boxes is a voter can deliver their ballot to that container, again, not knowing who it is that's retrieving it, if assuming that it is retrieved on a timely basis. So it's up to the voter to decide who they trust or how they best feel in terms of returning their ballot.
Which is a wonderful lead-in, Secretary, and we really appreciate that answer and candidness. We did receive two more. These kind of go hand in hand. The first is, how can we determine if a drop box is unauthorized? And secondly, what will happen to the ballots dropped in the illegal boxes that have been acknowledged?
Okay, I'll just mention a couple things quickly and defer to Neal. And as some member, I'm sad this will be the last question. I can feel I got to jump and get ready for my next Zoom. That's the,
yes,
the
I
life we're
understand
living right now. But look, I think tips for identifying the official drop boxes: look at the box itself. It must, among other things, contain the county seal. And so any unauthorized boxes that are misrepresented by use of a government seal is another violation of the drop box. Locations are available both on the Secretary of State's website at vote.ca.gov or on the Orange County Registrar's website, so you know precisely where the official drop boxes are located before you drop your ballot in. But how the rest is going to be handled, I'll defer to Neal at this point, and thank you all again. Have a great day.
We'd like to thank you, Mr. Secretary of State, for giving us your time. We thank you for your incredible work. Thank you so much. And then we'll wrap it up here with Neal. Do you want to add anything to that last question? Thank you, Secretary.
Yes, Secretary. Yeah, I would just add that one of the things that you can see with our boxes, they're very large. They're about 1,000 pounds bolted to the concrete. They do have the county seals the secretary mentioned. They also have a Dropbox number on there, as well as the legal language that's required, as well as our phone number, so that they can call our office if there's any issues with the Dropboxes. And those locations at ocvote.com, you'll just click your ballot return options and you can see a map and see where those locations are. And I just want to add one thing to what the secretary said. You know, I've had about 50 media inquiries on this issue, and one of the questions they asked, well, what's the problem with this? Well, if I hand my mail off to somebody, a friend of mine, I said, hey, can you take this mail and deliver it for me? That's allowed in the law. But what's not allowed is for my friend to set up a mailbox on the corner and paint it white and stick mailbox on top of it, because that's the post office's purview, right? And so I think if you use that same analogy here, there are reasons why that those official drop boxes need to be managed and maintained by my office.
Okay, thank you. Well, we appreciate all of you who have joined us. We know that there's a lot of energy going into making sure that our elections are safe, they're secure, people have transparency, tracking your ballot. There's just so much that we are doing now with voting that I don't even think we could have imagined many years ago. And so I think it's an exciting time. And if you need any more support, you can go to ocvote.com or voteca.gov. Is that it?
.sos.gov.
Oh, .sos. Both sites for the state Secretary of State and for our county, Orange County. But I'm going to leave you with, I have full confidence in our Orange County voting system. I know that we often are ahead of the game when we look at other counties. And so I'm just going to give a huge shout out to Neal, Kelley, and thank you so much, because I know your team is going to be working overtime in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks here. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us, and please leave your email or go to our website so you can be updated on future conversations that we'll have, and hopefully in person soon. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.